I want to welcome you to the Pro Mindset Podcast. The Pro Mindset Podcast is all about diving into the headspace that results in championship performance. High-performing athletes, winners, have this mental flow and have a positive headspace for their performances and success. Join me, Craig Doman, sports attorney and NFL agent, on this podcast. I will interview pro athletes, college athletes, football coaches, and sports personalities. Together, we can discover how you can get in the flow and have your own pro mindset. So today on Pro Mindset, we have a gentleman, Dr. Patrick Cohn from Peak Performance. He's a sports psychologist in Central Florida. Patrick, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Craig.
Okay, so you have written a book, or maybe more than one, but one that shows up on your website is 10 Costly Mental Game Mistakes Athletes Make Before Competition. Tell me what your book's about, and maybe give us a laundry list of those 10 common mistakes.
Yeah, and that's just a free ebook that I offer, but I definitely have several books out there that people can find at peaksports.com. In terms of the mental training, we teach what are called lessons to athletes, and those are the lessons that we teach to what we call our personal coaching students. And we find that those are effective and they work. We help athletes learn how to manage expectations, learn how to focus properly and refocus when they're distracted. That's big. Have proactive self-confidence, have trust in their skills, which means to be able to take their practice skills out to competition with them, deal with mistakes, be able to let go of mistakes and don't let that lead to tanking or giving up or emotional challenges, and pre-game routines, pre-shot routines, lots of areas that athletes can learn from in terms of the mental game.
Okay. So let's just take a young man that may be playing college football in the Power 5. So he's playing at Florida State. He's playing in Gainesville up at Florida. And his dream is to play in the NFL for Tampa Bay, Jacksonville, or Miami, or one of the other teams. What are the common mental weaknesses guys at that level typically have?
Well, the profile of the athlete that we tend to work with is the athlete that's highly motivated, that has a high level of work ethic, and sometimes can be an overthinker or an overanalyzer or trying to be too perfect when they go perform. So you might think of it as paralysis by, overanalysis. These are the athletes that are great practice players, and then when they get into competition, they tend to be overthinkers. They're continuing to practice their skills, and they're not just playing. So it's weird in my work that I'm trying to get athletes to simplify when they go perform instead of make it more complex for themselves. So perfectionism, trying too hard, worry, anxiety, fear of failure, self-critical behavior, being upset with mistakes. Those are the common threads that we see with athletes in that profile.
Okay, so let's take one of those. Is it by socioeconomic background? Is it by sport? Is it by position in a sport that you see common threads? Let's just take a young man, and this podcast applies to women too, but we're talking about football. So when a guy's an overthinker, he obviously he's not playing fast. He's not making plays. He's the guy that's coming off the field that's saying my bad to his coaches and his teammates because he almost made the play. What is your antidote or kryptonite to address someone that's an overthinker?
Well, in that situation, one of the most important things that athletes can do is learn to be more decisive. What that means is you're always going to be presented with options in football, right? There's always going to be, okay, do I drop back into a coverage or, do I go and fill a hole, right? You always are going to have options in terms of what you need to do, especially in the quarterback position, as you know, if you're running the run-pass option. So what I tell athletes is, look, you cannot second-guess yourself. So a lot of that overthinking, and we could talk about different levels of overthinking, certainly, but one of the biggest ones is athletes who tend to second-guess what they're doing in that moment. And they'll have an idea in their mind, okay, I'm going to go to my number one receiver, I'm going to throw an out or whatever. And then they go, well, wait a second, he might be covered. There must be a better option. Right? And that's where the second guessing comes from, because they want to make that perfect play or they want to make the right play in that moment. So the antidote, as you said, and there's no such thing as an antidote in my work, right? There's just education and application of the mental skills. I don't have any magic dust, but what I try to get them to do is be more athletic in that moment, that they have to trust their 10 years, 12 years, 14 years of playing ball in that moment. They got to throw away playing by the book, right, which a coach would cringe if he heard me say that. But they throw away the book so that they can just go with their first instinct. So it's being decisive, it's going with their first instinct, and not second-guessing what their plan is to begin with. So that's one level of overthinking, that I work hard with athletes to try to simplify what they're doing.
Let me jump in there if I may, Doc.
Sure.
Okay, Patrick. So, keep it in layman's terms for my sake. What I tell my clients is make your decision the right decision. So whatever your instincts are, trust your instincts and make it right. So if you're a quarterback and you've got 5 eligible receivers on any given play, maybe only 4 receivers are going out, but max you can have is 5. You've got 4. So regardless of who you throw it to, there's 3 other options. But make the player that you're throwing it to the right option.
In your mind, you're saying no, it's the right option, yeah, and not second guess it. It's a yes or a no. It's not a maybe, right?
Yes.
Correct.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about what is the reasoning behind perfectionism, especially in competition. Obviously, let's just take golf. You work on your technique on the range, but you just got to make a play when you're swinging the club on the course. You just got to make a shot.
Yeah.
Because there is some merit to being a perfectionist.
Yes.
Okay? At certain times, that's how you groove your skills.
Very
but once
important.
you get But what I loved, what I've never heard anybody say before, throw away the book, because this is the thing that's nuts. I've coached football. I've coached other sports. At the end of the day, all you care about is the result. You don't, as a coach, you don't care how he did it. You don't care how he got there. You teach in practice the best way, the best technique to get there, to make it happen. But once you get in the game, just make it happen.
Correct. I mean, I call it, performing functionally, getting the job done. Brad Gilbert in the tennis world called it winning ugly. Yeah, athletes sometimes, the perfectionist athlete, as you said, there's a lot of advantages that go with it. High level of motivation, ability to reach for goals, they're very coachable. They want to listen to everything the coach has to say. They're willing to put in the extra reps, on and on, right? Super important for athletes who want to grow and develop. But you're right. Once they get in the game, they have to play more athletically and stop what we call stop training in the game. Now just play. And for perfectionists, often what hurts them in that situation is they feel like they got to continue to do the perfect thing, make the perfect decision, perform perfectly. Sometimes they'll get bogged down into their technique and mechanics, and they're still training instead of, okay, now I just got to picture the play in my head, and I've got to react to what I see. And so they struggle with that because that's too simple, right? Yeah, no, you just tell me not to think. You just tell me to look and react. Yeah, exactly.
Well, my brain is going 100 miles an hour right now because this issue that you're talking about right now really is a major divider between the guys that are the superheroes on the field and the guys that look the part, do all the right things, coaches dream, but they don't make the plays. And there's something about sports that allows competitors to be successful without doing it by the book. You only have the book because you have to have something to do in practice. You only have the book as a guide, not as a mandate.
Right, exactly. And athletes, they want to do right by the team. They want to do right by the coach, and sometimes they'll get bogged down into overthinking the book and wanting to do it just the right way in competition, which sounds good to them. Mentally it's like, hey, I got to do the perfect thing. I got to do the right thing. I got to play exactly the way coach wants me to. I got to make the perfect decisions that coach wants me to. And that will bog them down with not only expectation, but with performing tentatively and scared to screw up. And that's another disadvantage of the perfectionist, is because they want to win so badly, because they want to do the right thing, they tend to get bogged down in the worry and tentative play.
Yeah. Well, I have a real life situation with a client right now whose coach is testing him, and the player's confused. And the thing that I told my client was, there's a game within the game. There's several games within the game. Within just the game of coach expectations, some coaches want their guys to be tough. They don't care about anything else. If you're tough, you're that coach's guy. Other coaches just want effort. They don't care about results until the game starts. In practice, they just want effort. So they reward, acknowledge, commend the players that give the most effort. But if that player's not making plays in the game, he's on the bench. And so as a young man that's playing a sport that you can't do it without a coach. There's very few sports. I don't know if there is a sport that you don't have a coach. Golf is a sport you kind of have your own coach, but any team sport, it's driven by the coach. So the factor that most players don't consider is the relationship and the connection they have with their coach is paramount to building trust with that coach so they can actually be in the game. Absent trust with your coach, you're not getting in the NFL. Coach doesn't trust you, he's not pitching the game. So that begs the question, how do you build trust? Well, you have to have a relationship with the coach. Well, how do you have a good relationship with your coach? We have to understand what his expectations are. Well, what are his expectations? He wants you to be tough. So you got to be tough. At all costs, you have to be tough. If you're not tough, you're not going to play. And that is so difficult for young men to understand, that this is a game within the game driven by coaches' expectations, and you having a relationship with your coach so you actually know what his expectations are so that you can have a good connection with your coach in practice so you can actually get an opportunity to play the game you love.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, having the open communication channel and having a relationship with the coach. But as a coach yourself, are you going to play the guy that's hanging on every word you say and is putting out the effort, but yet he tends to underperform in the game, versus the guy that's really not a great practice player, but he shows up at game time? He could be a star, and he plays with a lot of confidence and a lot of trust in his skills. That's the conundrum for coaches. Do I put the guy in that's just, listening to everything I say and putting out the effort, or do I put the guy in that's getting it done on game day?
I think it depends. In the preseason, during training camp, during the off season, when you have new people come in and you haven't played any games yet, all coaches hang their hat on the guy that is attentive, that's focused, that's coachable, that's given the effort. And then when the games start, then it changes. Mm-hmm. But the guy that's going to get the most opportunity is that player that is the most coachable, that is playing the game the coach wants him to play. But once things reveal themselves, if a player that's coachable can kick butt on the field, he's not coming off.
Yeah,
sometimes it, right? So sometimes it takes an injury by that player or a bad play before the guy that's even better gets a chance.
Yeah, true.
So I really feel like one of the things that's missing in our athletes' development, especially in the mental games, is their understanding of how to cultivate and nurture a relationship with a coach without feeling like they're being a brown noser, kiss-asser, all those types, yes man, all those types of things. So what is your recommendation to competitors with respect to their relationship with their coaches?
Well, as you know, a lot of it's going to depend on the coach, too. Do they feel comfortable going? Does the coach have that open door policy and encourage players to come and, and discuss stuff with them? So let's start there, right?
Yep.
If really old school coaches are just, put out the effort, practice hard, work hard, and show me you want to do it. And it comes down to putting your nose to the grindstone, right? But from the athlete side, I think the one question that coaches want to hear is, Coach, how can I improve? Or Coach, how can I get better? All coaches want to hear that. So if you approach it from the perspective that you don't know it all, right, you're willing to learn, you're willing to get better, ask coach, how are you going to improve your skills? How are you going to improve understanding the playbook? Coach, how do I improve my focus? Those are the questions, the growth, taking that growth perspective are the questions that coaches want to hear, which shows the guy's willing to learn, guy's coachable, and wants to be a part of the team.
Yep. Okay, that's good. I'm making some notes. Okay. So we discussed earlier off the call that confidence is such a huge part of competition and athlete performance. What is your perspective on confidence? Is it something you make a decision about every day? Is it something that grows over time? How do players develop confidence?
Yeah, I think it comes from years and years of practice and play, and I try to get athletes to focus on the stable confidence instead of what I call fragile confidence, where it goes up and down with every play. Self-confidence is simply an athlete's belief in their ability to execute their skills and what they practice every day. A lot of things can get in the way of that confidence, and athletes need to be mindful of what I call the confidence busters. That's super important. But it's about being more proactive with confidence. I find a lot of the athletes I work with, at many levels, they tend to react to their circumstances and what's going on in the moment instead of bringing a strong. So athletes do need to cultivate that and work on that, but at the same time understand that they are a product of years and years of training and practice, and always remember that. So I try to differentiate the difference between confidence in your ability versus what's happening in the game, the momentum shifts that happen within a game. Doesn't mean if you don't have momentum, it doesn't mean that you should lose confidence in your skills. You're still the same player that you started the game with. Your skills are still the same. Just in the moment, the other team has the momentum. So I differentiate that for athletes in the hopes that to stabilize that confidence for them. And in terms of proactive confidence, that basically means helping athletes fuel their confidence before the competition and not waiting until they score the first touchdown, for example, or they make a couple of good blocks or a couple of good receptions. No, they have to bring the confidence that they have from that years of practice and training. That's how I approach confidence. But it is massively huge, if I can say that, for athletes to have that confidence, because I call it a cure-all for the mental game. When you have confidence, it rubs off on other parts. You can focus better. You can let go of mistakes. You don't get nervous or anxious or worry about what others think of your game. So it's extremely important for other, what I call mental skills or other components of the mental game.
Let's break this down. Let's get a little bit deeper into this confidence belief in yourself area. Okay, so totally get the stable confidence, from being one of the best, putting in the time, you feel like you almost deserve to win. You deserve to be successful. You are entitled because you've worked harder. You've played longer. You've wanted it more. You've done it more. You've won more accolades prior to this competition. It'd be no different than an NFL team that's 16-0 going into the playoffs versus a team that's 10-6. You just have this confidence that we've done it all year. We deserve to win. We beat them twice in the regular season. Whereas fragile confidence, as I'm gleaming it to mean based upon what you said, is the team that's 10-6 scores the first touchdown. I mean, they'd run the opening kickoff back for a touchdown, and the other team that's 16-0 is thinking, uh-oh, is this going to be one of those days? Could this be a crazy upset?
Yeah, and from the individual perspective, it can be, I dropped my first reception, or I threw an interception in the first series, right? And it's like, uh-oh, is it going to be one of those games? So it can be an individual phenomenon as well as a team phenomenon.
Well, part and parcel why so many offensive coordinators call an easy pass play the first passing attempt A lot of times it's a check down, it's a swing route to the running back. There's no defender between the quarterback and the intended receiver. The reason to do that is to get that fragile confidence question answered by, hey, you're 1 for 1.
Right.
Okay, and then they can go through a bang 8 or a tougher pass that's more risky, that's more difficult because now the quarterback's warmed up. So when you said that confidence is a cure-all, expand on that.
So if you have an athlete that goes in with a high level of confidence, proactive confidence, that athlete knows that he or she can perform well from the get-go. They're not judging their warm-up as subpar, for example. They're just going with the flow. That athlete is more immune to things like mistakes, for example. It's like, oh, well, that's a fluke, right? So it's, for example, a golfer, if they hit a bad tee shot or they hit a bad iron shot on the first hole and they're supremely confident, they're going to go, well, that shot's a fluke. I'm going to get right back to hitting the ball solid or hitting the ball straight. So that's an example of, I think, how confidence is a cure-all is it helps other parts of the mental game. If they're questioning or doubting and they hit that first bad shot or they throw that first, interception in the first series or drop a ball in the first series, then now it's like, oh, is this how it's going to go today? Right? Should I be frustrated? Should I be upset and frustrated and show my teammates I'm better than that? Right? So that's one example. And I think you could also talk about if you have a lot of confidence, it's a lot harder to get nervous with your performance because you feel like on the inside that you're going to do well, you're going to perform well, you're going to bring it, rather than on the other side, if you're unsure about your performance, that can create more stress, more anxiety, and worry for athletes. So look, that's a couple examples how I feel like confidence helps with other parts of the mental game.
Well, how do guys, let's say, for example, a guy has everybody in the NFL has stable confidence. Everybody does. You can't get to that level. The odds are they're too long. It's too difficult. There's 90 guys that show up to training camp every single year, and they cut it down to 53. And, Doc, how many guys do you think out of that 90 don't want to make the team?
Yeah, I think they all want to make the team.
They all want to make the team really bad.
The question is how many of them believe, how many of that 90 believe they can make the team, that they've got the skills? Well,
I guarantee you probably at least 75 do. And the 15 that don't cut themselves within the first couple weeks because they give off an energy of, I'm hoping I can make it. I hope I can do it. I hope they don't cut me. I hope they like me. And they don't. And they do cut me. Okay? But of those 75, when they cut it down to 53, all those guys are believers.
Yeah.
All of them. And they all have confidence. And 46 get the dress on the opening game on each side. And, 11 guys are out on the field for each side. One team gets hot, catches a break, gets the bounce of the ball, gets a great call, gets a benefit of a call from an official. And, it might be the end of the first quarter and one team's up 21-0. Okay, now we're talking about momentum confidence or fragile confidence. How do you, on the team that's down 21-0 at the end of the first quarter, after they spent the whole offseason talking about how great you guys were and how you had the potential to go to the Super Bowl, and it's the first game, and you're down 21-0 before, some of the people haven't even gotten their seats yet. What do you recommend to an athlete in that situation to make sure his confidence is at the highest level?
Well, first of all, there's only one thing that the athletes can do in that situation, and it's not stress that we're down 21-0. It's we need to take it one play at a time and do the best we can on this one play. Put a series together of plays so that we can get a first down and get some momentum going and get things going. So it starts small, I feel like, with that one play. Hey, do you have confidence that you can execute that block? Do you have a belief that you can run that route or that you can hit that receiver? As you said, they all start the game with confidence. So it's about understanding that they don't have the momentum And they have to create that momentum. And the way that they're going to create that momentum is going to be focusing on that one play and believing that they can move the sticks one set of downs at a time. Instead of, having that on your shoulders of, this is futile. We're 10 minutes in the game and we're down 21-0. So that type of thinking isn't going to be conducive for mounting a comeback.
I agree with that. And what I tell my guys is the only play you should care about is the next play and doing your job on that play, making sure your teammates believe you're going to do your job so they don't think about doing yours and theirs. When a young man in a team sport decides to do somebody else's job, he never does his own. And so if you're not exuding confidence that I got this, you are inviting your teammates to do your job for you, and then they're going to fail because they're not going to do their own, and then the play's not going to work. So if you can have 11 guys all on the same page, I don't care if the score is 48-0. It's all you can focus on is the next play, the play that we're lining up for right now. And if you have 11 dudes that have on their mind that I'm going to execute, I'm going to do my job, we can do this. Pretty soon it's 48-7, then 48-14, and so on and so forth.
Absolutely. Agreed.
The other thing that I find, and I saw this and I didn't understand it, didn't have the awareness about it until I have two boys that play college football. When they were younger, I coached them in basketball, and basketball was where I saw it the most, is when you start the game with a tremendous amount of momentum and get a big lead, the guys start coasting.
Yeah.
When the other team does that to you and you find yourself on the wrong end of a big deficit on the scoreboard, doesn't matter if there's what time it is in the game. Generally, in the first three quarters, your team has a tendency to be selfish. It's, I got to get my points. We're not going to win, so I might as well get my points. Okay? Grandpa said he would take me to Dairy Queen and buy me a shake or a sundae if I scored 20 points. I'm going to get my 20. And in both of those situations, I think it's thinking, both of them. And if we would keep score, because I believe in competition, I want a winner and a loser. I don't think everybody should get a ribbon. But I do think they should eliminate scoreboards for youth sports and tell them after the game who won. Because I think you'd get so much more effort. You would get a more genuine game because everybody would have to play like they'd have to give everything they got every play because you just did it. You really, unless you're keeping track in your head, you really don't know who's winning.
Yeah, it's huge, I think. It's huge when there's a big disparity in the score. You talked about when the one team is up, they tend to coast. Yeah. I call it sitting on the lead. Call it complacent. I don't think it's much complacency as it is, okay, we got this game in the bag. Do we really need to press on here? And I think if they didn't expect to be up, they can play more defensively, which means they play tentatively and defensively, afraid to let go of the lead, afraid to screw up the lead. I see that all the time in tennis and golf and some of the athletes I work with in those sports, and I put it under this category of comfort zones. They're in a discomfort zone, actually. Well, we didn't expect to be up this much. Let's not screw it up. And then they play more protectively and defensively, and then they give momentum to the opposition because the opposition starts to sense that. They're playing prevent, right? Yeah. Prevent defense, and then it just causes the other team to get that momentum. On the other side, yeah, I think you're right, is athletes can get selfish and start focusing on scoring and, just focusing on me rather than on the team, which they should be trying to garner momentum and stealing momentum. Even if the game is out of hand, you want that team to be able to get something going at the end of the game where they can carry that momentum over to the next week.
Well, as you were speaking there about comfort zones, I was just writing down a couple things, Patrick. One is that comfort zones, when the scoreboard does not match your expectations, fall into one of two areas because there's three comfort zones, but there's two that are uncomfortable. If your expectations are it's going to be a close game, and it's a close game, you're comfortable being in a close game. Your coach has prepared you for competing in a close game. Mm-hmm. The game plan is consistent with a close game, and you're guarding your performance Like the running back's going to take extra care of the ball because it's a close game, and the coaches have harped on him all week. Don't put the rock on the ground. You know, that could be the deciding factor.
Mm-hmm.
Quarterback's not going to maybe make a pass when there's a tight window because he's like, hey, if you throw a pick, that might be the difference. But if it's not a close game and you're way ahead or way behind, you're uncomfortable in both.
Correct.
And your coaches typically haven't prepared themselves, let alone the players, for those situations. Coaches don't think that way. And so Houston Texans last year in Kansas City were up 24 points on the Super Bowl champions. And I was speaking to one of the Texans front office guys a month or so ago about the game. And he's like, hey, we all thought it was over. We were already planning for the next week. You don't give up 24-point leads in the playoffs. But they did. And the NFL rewarded them by giving them a redemption opportunity because Houston plays at Kansas City in week 1 of the 2020 season. But Kansas City was probably uncomfortable too because they're down 24-0 at home, and they were thinking they were going to win. But Patrick Mahomes has an unbelievable mental game.
Mm-hmm.
His mental game might surpass his physical skills because he came from behind 3 times in the playoffs this year to win it. So what is your perspective on that?
Yeah, as you said, a lot of it has to do with expectations. You know, we don't expect to be down at this point in the game, but a lot of it has to do with confidence as well. So the team that's winning and is up big and didn't expect to be up big, they're going to go into protect mode. The team that's down and feel like they shouldn't be down, they're going to go into scramble and aggressive mode. They're just going to put all their chips on the table and go for it.
Absolutely.
It's their only option. It's kind of like the golfer that shoots himself in the foot the last round of a tournament and makes a double. Hey, you know what? I have no other option but to just play hard and try to make some birdies coming in.
Hey, I'm just going to shoot for the pin.
Yeah.
I'm not going to play it safe. I don't care. I don't even see the water. And they might end up within a foot of the hole because they actually aimed there, where if they would have been in a different situation, they would have never in their right mind gone for the pin.
Just points to how huge the mental game is, how huge momentum is, confidence, expectations entering the game, and what you expect of the outcome. All of that is super important for what actually is going to determine the outcome.
Okay, so is it fair to say if we tie these two concepts together, which is one concept is how confident you are in your ability to execute and how the momentum of the game and your performance plays out. You could be a receiver that, catches a touchdown pass the first time you touch the ball. It also could be a receiver that either drops the first one or doesn't get a pass thrown to him for the first quarter. So he's now feeling sorry for himself, sitting on the bench like, why am I not in the game plan? Why isn't the quarterback throwing me the ball? So there's all those things going on. And then there's the grander scheme of things, which is how are we doing? What's the score? How comfortable are we with where we're at compared to what the score is and how much time's left? And it permeates not just in the performers on the field. It is in the cells of the coaches calling the game.
Yeah, and throwing expectations into that mix too. Where did we expect to be?
No doubt.
What do we expect the score to be or the winner to be? Who should win?
No doubt. So what I sense is that how does pressure affect confidence? Because if you thought you were going to win, or maybe you thought you were going to kill them, and you're looking up at the scoreboard at halftime or you're running off the field into the locker room at halftime and you guys are down a couple touchdowns when you expected to be up a couple touchdowns, and you start thinking about what the heck's coach going to say? Is he going to be pissed off? Is he going to – a lot of these coaches flip out at halftime and they totally change their game plans. And the player has to have a mental acuity to an alertness to receive it. And they have to prepare themselves as they're walking off the field to receive that because it's coming. And a lot of players are not ready for it. So a coach does a brain dump, does an overhaul, changes the game plan, and half his players don't get it. And then he wonders why they don't do what he expected them to do when he modified the game plan. It's not about how great the changes and adjustments are. It's how much of that was actually received by his players. So a lot of what we're talking about also applies equally to the coaches.
Well, I think athletes, depending on the athlete, they're going to respond obviously different to that. Some athletes are going to get fired up and say, hey, we have no other option but go out and play aggressive and let loose. I call it, playing with reckless abandon. if we're going to make a comeback. Other athletes might feel frustrated, might feel offended, demotivated on how the coach came down on them, or even, be anxious and not want to screw up and thus play tentatively. So I think depending on the type of athlete that you're dealing with, they're going to go in two different directions. One is going to go for it and just play with reckless abandon. Another athlete might just go inward and try not to mess up because they don't want to get another earful, right?
Okay, so let's talk about this playing with reckless abandon. That's somewhat synonymous with playing freely.
Yes.
Carefree, not worried about the consequences of your actions.
Correct.
Not like anticipating the commentary you might get from your coach if you don't do it the way he wants you to do it.
Exactly.
You're almost indifferent to the coaching. You almost turn a deaf ear to the coaches.
Well, you stop worrying about I think you stated it well. You're not worried about the consequences of throwing an interception. You're not worried about the consequences of running the wrong route if the play breaks down. You're just trying to get the job done any way you can, and you're out there playing aggressively in the moment without fear of retribution by the coach or consequences of making mistakes or making turnovers. Yeah, so I think you stated it well. There's no consequences, no fear of what's going to happen if you screw up. You're just in the moment trying to make things happen.
Well, kids today would call that LFG. Let's F and go.
Yeah.
And not stress out, not worry about what the parents are thinking in the stands, what the coaches are screaming about. I see a lot of times some of the best games and best performances happen when the coaches are going ape shit crazy on the sidelines and the players are just acting like, I got it, we're just going to play ball. It's not that they're being defiant. It's not that they're not listening, but they're not stooping down to the level that the coaches have gone. It might be a problem for the coach because he feels like he's going to look bad, he's going to fall in the rankings, he's going to have to deal with the media after the game. The players perform best when they divorce themselves from those thoughts and from those responsibilities and from that attitude that sometimes coaches display.
Well, they can't take it out into the second half with them. It's like a monkey on the back, as my mentor Ken Revisit would say. If you're just dwelling on, what the coach thinks or what the coach said at halftime, that's not going to allow you to go out there and play freely and get the job done because you're still thinking in the past about woe was me. That wasn't fair of the coach, or that was awful of the coach, or that's not helping me. Right?
Absolutely. Okay, let's go back to what a player can do to hone his game mentally, train his mind to be stronger and more effective and more successful. If there's a young man that's a competitor, that is an athlete out there that's thinking, man, what could I do to make sure that I maximize my performance the next time I have a competition? How can I train my brain? What would you tell them?
Well, I think first you got to believe in the notion of mental coaching and mental training, that it can help. There is a certain population of athletes out there that think it's hocus pocus, or I don't need it, or I already have it, right? So that's step one. Step two, if they buy into it, then they got to step on the field and be focused, bring that confidence, as we've been talking about, bring that proactive confidence, be composed, and in a high state of trust. And that's what we've been talking about for about the last 10 minutes, is you got to trust in your skills and play athletically. I don't know if I'm oversimplifying it for you, but
here's what I want. I'm going to put myself in the athlete's shoes, and I've got a season I'm preparing for. Hopefully we're going to have a full slate of games. We've got camp coming up here late in the summer. It's a fall sport. It could be football. It could be anything. What can I do besides like calling a mental coach and setting up sessions? What are the freebies that they can do? I mean, just like golf. You can go get the highest priced golf instructor, the guy that maybe teaches Tiger Woods, if he even has any availability. Or you can just go to the putting green and keep your eyes open. Really read the putt. Just practice on reading the putt. See if that makes a difference. Probably does. From a mental standpoint, what can a young man or young competitor do to make their mental acuity higher?
one thing would be just be aware when you're distracted and be able to refocus. That's one of the skills I teach, is the refocusing skill. Be aware when you're out of your routine or you're distracted by what I call an external, and be able to refocus your mind. So little things like that, I think, and athletes being able to practice that so they can take it to competition with them, become helpful. Instead of a distraction playing on for 5 minutes in someone's mind, it's playing on for 5 seconds, because they're aware that they're distracted and are able to adjust their focus.
Okay. I agree with that, and I think that's very valuable. I think part of the reason why we have momentum shifts is because of distractions and unfocus. The team that typically has momentum against them just went through a state of not being focused. Mm-hmm. I mean, opening kickoffs, if everybody's focused, normally there's no score. The guy's tackled. It's when a few guys are looking in the stands with their girlfriends, they're thinking about something else, they're thinking about where they're going to go party or have dinner after the game, not even thinking about the play, and they take the wrong angle, lose leverage. Next thing you know, the guy's blowing right by him. It only takes one guy to be unfocused for the other team to score a touchdown.
Correct.
So I 1,000% agree with you that losing your focus hinders your performance and causes the other team typically to gain momentum. So that begs the question then, why do people lose focus?
Well, many reasons. They pay attention to the wrong cues. They pay attention to the externals, what's going on around them. Tennis player focusing on the adjacent court, for example, or a golfer paying attention to parents' reactions. That's number one.
I agree with that.
Number two is it's the internal distractions, Craig, that are really harmful. And athletes are humans, and they're not going to be perfect with their focus, right? Internal distractions are some of the things that we've talked about. Man, why did I drop that pass? Oh, that was so awful. That was, he hit me right in the numbers. And so that would be classified as thinking in the past and judging, analyzing what happened in the past, or thinking ahead. You've talked some about that, where you're thinking about the consequences of, hey, if this happens, if I drop another one, coach is going to pull me, or I'm not going to play the next game. So athletes tend to think on a broader timeline than they need to. Sometimes they dwell in the past, sometimes they get ahead of themselves, and those are part of the internal distractions that go on, or just a random thought. As you said, where's the party tonight, which has nothing to do with running the current play. So athletes become distracted because they're human, and they're not robots. They have emotions. They have these thoughts and these feelings all the time. And so they need to be able to have the awareness that I'm not focusing on the current play, or I'm not letting go of the last play, and I need to get my mind in a better place. That's really, and being able to anticipate and adjust. I tell my certification students all the time that that's what we do as mental coaches. We get athletes to be able to anticipate their push buttons, their challenges, and to have strategies ready to adjust.
I love that. It totally makes sense. You do that all the time with your game, with your skills, with your strategies, with your plays. And if you're a defensive player, and let's say you're a defensive lineman, you're anticipating a double team. Well, you know how you're going to respond to it. You're anticipating a cut block. You know how you're going to respond to that. So it would make sense that you would anticipate distractions. You have a bad play and you go, okay. And you have to have an intentional thought process of, I could dwell on this. I could anticipate the issues. What's going to happen to me. I could look over my shoulder and see if they're going to pull me. I'm just going to focus on my next play. And it almost would like be a trigger. You're going to have a games or a series of good plays, missed plays, and you're not even in the play. That's generally what goes on in a game, especially football. Well, every time you have a missed play, which is a bad play, you could have a mental thought or strategy attached to it that, hey, I'm flushing that play. I'm focusing on the next one. I don't give a dang what the coach thinks. It's over. We'll talk about it on Monday when we watch film. You being the expert, would you recommend equipping your athletes with some type of connection between an event that's going to happen every single game, which is a bad play, and a
coping.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's, like I said, that's what mental coaching, I feel like, is all about, is being able to adjust. Know your push buttons. Know that, hey, as a quarterback, I'm going to get upset, or my likelihood of getting upset is increased if I'm going to make the wrong decision, a broken play, maybe throw an interception. What are my personal push buttons that are going to affect me? And then I want a coping response. How am I going to deal with that? How am I going to brush that off and get back to the next series? So that's hugely important for athletes. Some people would say, that's just negative thinking. You're thinking about making mistakes, right? No, mistakes happen. You're thinking about how you're going to accept it and cope with it and move on. To me, that's just good thinking. My mentor, Ken Ravizza, said, you got to learn how to have a good, shitty day, right? If things aren't going well, you still got to be able to keep your head in the game. Or if you don't have your A game, you got to be able to adjust. So a lot of what I do, if you're in the zone and you're just in the moment and you're performing well and you're thinking well, ride it, go with it, don't analyze it. But oftentimes it's not that smooth for athletes, and you got to learn to adjust. When you get distracted, when you have a doubt, when you start thinking ahead, when you're worrying about what your teammates or coach think, you got to be able to have a coping response.
Okay, so let's shift, Patrick, to the zone, being in the moment, being in the flow. The basket looks like the ocean. The hole for a running back looks like an 18-wheeler could drive right through it. I mean, just the game slows down. You see things happening sometimes before they do. What is your definition of the zone? And then what can an athlete do to either get into it? And if he can't do anything, but he finds himself in it, what can he do to write it out, as you said?
Well, the zone is when everything's clicking. You're into this state of flow. You're totally immersed into the moment. You're having fun. Could be time flies, changes in time, and your performance is spot on. You're performing the way you've trained yourself to perform. No fear. You can't make yourself get in the zone. A lot of athletes will come to me and say, hey, I want to learn how to get into the zone, right? And I'm saying, well, I'm not sure that's the purpose of what we're trying to do. Now, you can set the conditions so that the athlete can perform consistently well, close to their ability. It's kind of like I work with skaters, and they want to go out and have a PR, a personal record every time they do their routines. Same with gymnasts. It's like, well, no, that's not the objective. The objective is to be able to be consistent with your performance like you show in practice and not go out and have a PR every time. So you can set the conditions for that by making sure the athlete they have that proactive confidence we talked about. They're focused on the right cues. They're in control of their emotions or ready to be able to adjust their emotions and their intensity level. So we like to talk about in the field of sports psychology is setting the conditions for the athlete to have a good performance, being mentally prepared and in the right mindset to have a good performance. But it's not about I need to enter the zone and have a PR every time.
Well, what come to my mind, I have an agricultural background. As a mental coach, you just want the athletes to understand how to prepare the soil so that when you get the opportunity to plant the seed, it grows. You can't just snap your fingers and have a plant that takes 3 months to grow overnight. And you can't really snap your fingers and teach an athlete how to be in the zone, because if any athlete, including Michael Jordan, LeBron, Tom Brady, you pick the guy, Tiger Woods, doesn't matter who it is, if they could bottle up how to get in the zone, wouldn't it make sense that they would do it every time?
Yeah, and I'd be put out of work, right? I wouldn't have a job anymore, right?
Well, and they would win the championship every year. They'd win every tournament. They'd win every game. Tom Brady's been demoted. He's been benched. Mm-hmm. Peyton Manning's thrown 5 interceptions in a game. Tiger Woods has not made the cut. It happens. Michael Jordan lost a lot of games before he ever won a championship.
Yeah.
So What you're saying is, and maybe I'm saying this, but I'm stealing it from you, is if you get your sleep, you visualize, you practice, you prepare, you do all the things that you're supposed to do to put yourself in the best possible position to be successful on game day.
Yes.
And then mentally, your expectations are that you want to do your best, but you don't know until you get on the field how close you're going to be to your best. And it's another game of expectations again. If you expected, this is a championship game, you expected it to be the game of your life, and you fumble the first time you get the opportunity to make a play. If you don't have a coping mechanism for that, it's going to be a miserable day.
Yep.
And when you get in that situation, whether it's, on the court, on the course, on the field, if I'm not qualified like you are. If you can just put yourself in a mental state of mind so that you could let your skills reveal themselves for the day and deal with the shit that comes, you're probably going to have a pretty good day.
Absolutely. Be confident, focus. Don't expect that you're going to score 6 touchdowns or have 15 tackles, but be ready when stuff happens. Stuff happens in sports, and you got to be ready to adjust.
Patrick, I have one final question. What is your professional opinion about why do players that perform well in games but don't perform well in practices, what's the reasoning for that? Because a lot of times the coaches don't even discover that they can play well in games until something happens and they have to put them in. They don't go into the game as a starter. And the reason why they don't go into the game as a starter is they didn't perform at a high level in practice. Mm-hmm. But once they get in the game, they play at a very high level. So I'm just curious, what's the mental mindset of a competitor that is a gamer, but for whatever reason doesn't have that same energy and moxie and zip and whatever else you want to call it in practice?
Well, one of the reasons is that athlete feels like that practice is kind of useless, that they have these abilities, they have a lot of faith and trust in their abilities, and that no amount of practice is really going to make them better. So they don't apply themselves in practice like a real practice player in that sense would. And then when they get in the game, they have, as you said, they become a gamer because they have a lot of faith and trust and confidence in what they do. And then they elevate their performance. The other idea is that's what excites them. Competition is thrilling for them. It's what gets their juices flowing. It gets the adrenaline, as you can say, going, and then that helps them elevate their game because of the excitement of competing. Whereas the perfectionist tends to go the opposite way. There tend to be more anxiety and worry about the competition, and they're more tight and anxious.
Well, that's what's really interesting about coaching, especially young people, is you don't know which one they are until you go through a season and you see them doing incredibly well in practice, but they're tight in the games, or they're not attentive in practice, not even trying hard in practice, but you put them in the games and they kill it. And, as a coach, most coaches don't have the self-awareness to realize that there's these different types of scenarios.
Right.
They just assume the guy that is good in practice is going to be good in the games. That's why they have him shoot the technical fouls at the end of the game to win the game, because in practice he makes 9 out of 10, but in the games he makes 5 out of 10. But the coach doesn't connect the dots and it actually puts the wrong guy at the line because of what we're talking about.
Yep. Yep.
Well, Patrick, I want to thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and your wisdom and your professional opinion about some of these topics as it relates to the mental game. I want to wish you the very best of luck, and I also want you to share for our audience. You mentioned before your website, but mention it again, mention your company, mention your email address, whatever contact information you want to give them.
Yeah, jump over to peaksports.com. We have lots of articles, videos, free downloads on the mental game, and you can really educate yourself with a lot of the free tools. And certainly we do the coaching. We do one-on-one coaching, and we have audio and workbook programs for athletes if they want to take it to the next level as well. That's peaksports.com.
Thank you, Patrick. Have a great day.
Great. Thanks for having me, Craig.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Pro Mindset. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. You can follow us on our website, ProMindsetPodcast.com, or on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Pro Mindset Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you the next time.